Hello everyone. Welcome to another session in the Extensions 101 webinar series. So far in this year's edition, we have held 6 sessions where we explored a few important components available for building extensions for Zoho projects, Zoho CRM and Zoho Books. So you can always refer to the resources section available in the Zoho community page to check out the YouTube recordings of these previous sessions. So in today's session, we'll be focusing on another core feature of Zoho Books, which is going to be webhooks, and understand how they can help you automate in sending and receiving real-time data updates when building an extension for Zoho Books. So with that, let's get started with today's session. So we'll begin today's session with a quick introduction to what webhooks are and how they function within Zoho Books. From there, we'll walk you through the step-by-step process of creating a webhook, followed by a look at the different types of webhooks that are supported in a Zoho Books extension. And finally, we'll wrap up with the practical use case demonstration where we'll show you how webhooks can be utilized effectively within an extension that is built for Zoho Books. So now, what exactly are webhooks? In simple terms, when two applications are integrated and you want one of them to receive real-time data whenever a specific event occurs in the other, webhooks make that possible. So let's consider a scenario. Imagine you are integrating Zoho Books with Zoho Inventory using a custom extension. So now let's say an invoice is created in Zoho Inventory, and if you want Zoho Books to immediately receive and process information about that invoice, then you can achieve this using the webhooks option. So basically, webhooks act as a web callbacks when an event occurs in one application and instantly push data to another connected application. So to break it down further, let's say we have two applications, say application A and application B. So the application where the event takes place, let's say application A, must support the webhook functionality. So within application A, you can configure a webhook to trigger on a specific event. And when the event occurs, the webhook sends real-time data to application B. So at the same time, application B, which is going to receive this data, must also be capable of accepting and handling incoming webhook data in a supported format. So essentially, webhook allows seamless real-time communication between applications triggered by specific events and are a powerful tool when building integrated extensions. So this gives you a quick overview of what webhooks are and how they work. So now that we have understood what webhooks are, let's move on and look at the general steps involved in creating a webhook. So to keep things simple, let's once again take two applications, application A and application B. So from this explanation, let's assume that the app B is where the event is going to occur, and the application A will receive the real-time data. So we'll also assume that both app A and app B support webhook functionality. So the first step is to create a webhook in app B, which is the source application where the event is expected to happen. So while creating the webhook, there are two essential elements you will need to define. First, the triggering event. So you must specify the event in app B that should trigger the webhook. For example, creation of a new invoice or updation of a record. So this event acts as a condition upon which real-time data will be sent out. Next, the callback URL. So this is the URL provided by application A, which is capable of accepting the incoming data. So it serves as the endpoint that will receive the real-time data. So when the specified event occurs in application B, the webhook will post the real-time data to this callback URL in application A. So essentially, this URL defines where the data should be delivered into the target system. So to summarize, when creating a webhook in application B, you need to define an event that will trigger the webhook and provide a callback URL where the real-time data should be sent. So once both of these are configured, the webhook setup will be complete. So now, whenever the specified event occurs in application B, the webhook will automatically push real-time data to the application A through the configured callback URL. So from the URL, application A receives the incoming data and performs any necessary actions or processing based on the data that is received in the callback URL. So this is the general process of setting up a webhook between two applications. Next, let's take a look at the types of webhooks that are supported when you are developing an extension for Zoho Books. So while building a Zoho Books extension, you have the support for both inbound and outbound webhooks. Let's begin with inbound webhooks. So inbound webhooks allows Zoho Books to receive real-time data from an external system. For example, if Zoho Books is integrated with a third-party application that supports webhook functionality and you want Zoho Books to receive data whenever a certain event occurs in that external application, then inbound webhooks will help facilitate that incoming data flow. On the other hand, we also have outbound webhooks. So outbound webhooks are used when you want to send real-time data from Zoho Books to another application it is integrated with. So whenever an event occurs within Zoho Books, outbound webhooks can be configured to automatically post data to the third-party application, provided the external system is capable of receiving and processing the webhook request. So to summarize, the inbound webhooks are used to receive real-time data into Zoho Books whenever an event occurs in the third-party applications. And outbound webhooks are used to send the real-time data from Zoho Books to connected external applications on occurrence of the event in Zoho Books. So these are the two webhook types that allow the Zoho Books extension to handle both directions of data flow efficiently. So for our example use case today, we will be exploring how to build an inbound webhook in detail. So as part of the next slide, we'll walk you through the detailed steps required to configure an inbound webhook while developing a Zoho Books extension. So as we discussed earlier, inbound webhooks are used when real-time data needs to flow into Zoho Books whenever an event takes place in the third-party application. So this means that the third-party application must have the webhook support. So assuming the third-party application supports webhook, the first step is to create the webhook within the third-party application whenever an event will occur. So as we covered in the earlier slides, there are two key elements to configure when setting up this webhook. First, the event. So this is the specific action or trigger in the third-party application that should activate the webhook. Then the callback URL. So this is going to be the endpoint in Zoho Books where the real-time data will be sent. Since the Zoho Books is going to receive the real-time data, we'll need to generate a callback URL that can handle this incoming request. So to achieve this while developing a Zoho Books extension, you can make use of an incoming webhooks function. So within this extension, you need to create an incoming webhooks function. So once it is created, you will be provided with a unique URL for this particular function. So this URL acts as the callback URL and you will configure it in the webhook settings on the third-party application. So these incoming webhook functions serve as the entry point for incoming webhook data and therefore support inbound webhook functionality in Zoho Books extensions. So once both the event and the callback URL are configured and the webhook is created, so whenever an event occurs in the third-party application, the real-time data will be automatically posted to the incoming webhooks function in your Zoho Books extension. So this incoming webhooks function, having received the data, can now execute any logic needed inside Zoho Books using the incoming payload. So essentially, the incoming webhooks function not only provides the callback URL but also handles the entire data processing flow within the Zoho Books. So these are the steps of setting up an inbound webhook while building a Zoho Books extension. Next, we'll be walking through the example use case that demonstrate the steps involved in creating an inbound webhook. So in this example, we will cover how to configure the triggering event, then how to generate the callback URL using an incoming webhooks function, and finally how to how the incoming data is received and processed inside Zoho Books. So for our use case, we have taken an integration between Zoho Books and Zoho Desk. So, and here is our extension flow. So whenever a new contact is created in Zoho Desk, we want to capture that information automatically and create the same contact as a new contact inside Zoho Books. So to achieve this, we'll make use of the webhooks feature. So in this scenario, the event occurs inside Zoho Books, right? So Zoho Desk must support this webhook creation, and yes, it does support the webhook creation in Zoho Desk. Then we'll configure a webhook in Zoho Desk that triggers whenever a new contact is created within Zoho Desk. So using this webhook, the real-time contact data will be posted into the Zoho Books. So then inside Zoho Books, we'll handle the incoming data using an incoming webhooks function and extract only the required fields needed to create a contact in Zoho Books. So based on that, we'll then create a new contact record within Zoho Books. So this is a high level overview of the use case that we'll be exploring today. And this is going to be a practical example of how inbound webhooks can be used to sync data between Zoho Desk and Zoho Books in real time. So in this slide, I have included a visual representation of the use case that we have just discussed. As shown here, whenever a new contact is added in Zoho Desk, the configured webhook will capture the event in real time. So using the inbound webhook setup, the contact, that contact data is then automatically passed into Zoho Books. So from there, the incoming data is handled by an incoming webhooks function within the Zoho Books extension, which processes the payload and create a corresponding contact inside the Zoho Books. So essentially, the webhook acts as a bridge that keeps the contact data in sync between Zoho Desk and Zoho Books without any manual intervention. So to help you relate better to the use case that we are discussing, I have also included a sample output screenshots here in this slide. So when you see, so whatever we see here is the desk interface where we are in the process of adding a new contact. So I have entered some essential details like first name, last name, email and the account name. So now any contact created here in Zoho Desk along with these details will be captured by our configured webhook. Then the contact data will be passed in real time to Zoho Books where it will be used to create a new contact record, mirroring what was just added in Zoho Desk. So this gives you a quick visual context on where the event begins and how the data flows through the webhook into Zoho Books. Then as soon as the contact is created in Zoho Desk, the webhook immediately triggers and the contact information is pushed into Zoho Books. So you can see that the new contact created in Zoho Desk has been automatically added as a contact in Zoho Books, reflecting the real-time data flow powered by the inbound webhook setup. So this showcases how seamless and efficient webhook-driven integrations can be when building Zoho Books extensions. So in our use case, the core concept we are focusing on is webhooks, right? So this slide includes a visual representation of how the webhooks has been implemented. So we are working with the integration between Zoho Books and Zoho Desk. So within the Zoho Desk, the event is going to hacker. That is, adding a new contact is going to take place, right? So this means that the webhook must be configured in Zoho Desk, since that is where the triggering event is going to occur. So to set this up, the event as a creation of new contact and a callback URL which points to Zoho Books has to be defined. So now, where do we get this callback URL from? We generate it using an inbound webhook function in Zoho Books. So once we create the inbound webhooks function, Zoho Books provides us with a URL which serves as the callback endpoint. So this URL is then used while configuring the webhook in Zoho Desk, effectively subscribing the event to the callback. So with the webhook now configured, whenever a new contact is created in Zoho Desk, the webhook triggers and posts the real-time data to the callback URL, which is our incoming webhooks function in Zoho Books. So this data will arrive in the JSON format, and the incoming webhooks function will receive the payload. Then inside the incoming webhooks function, we can then pass the incoming data, extract only the required fields, and create a new contact in Zoho Books using that information. So this is how the webhook is handling behind the scenes for this particular use case, enabling a seamless real-time integration between Zoho Desk and Zoho Books using the inbound webhook support. So to implement this use case within a Zoho Books extension on the Sigma platform, there are a few components that need to be added in place. So I have listed the components on this slide and we'll go through them one by one. So the first is going to be the connections. Since we are pulling data from Zoho Desk into Zoho Books, there is a data transfer happening between two applications, right? So to ensure this data transfer is secure and authorized, we'll need to establish connections for both Zoho Books and Zoho Desk. So one connection will be created for Zoho Desk to access and retrieve its data. So and another connection will be created for Zoho Books to handle data within the extension itself. So we have already covered the topic of creating and configuring connections in detail in a previous extensions 101 webinar. So if you would like a refresher or need more guidance, you can access the recording of that session in the resources section on the Zoho community portal. So to summarize, we will be creating two separate connections, one for Zoho Desk and one for Zoho Books. So the next component is going to be webhook. So the second critical component is configuring the webhook in Zoho Desk. So Zoho Desk supports webhook creation via API. So here I have included a quick link to the Zoho Desk API documentation. Let's just get into the documentation. So here you can see the API endpoint used to create the webhook along with the necessary input parameters. So a few important fields required to configure this webhook are the events. So these are the events that trigger the webhook and are defined inside the subscriptions key. Next, we have the name and description. So these are the standard fields to identify the webhook. Then we need to provide the URL. So this is the endpoint URL in Zoho Books where the real-time data will be delivered. So as discussed earlier, this URL will be generated by the incoming webhooks function which we define within our Zoho Books extension. So the Zoho Desk documentation clearly outlines all the supported webhook events, and for our case, we can simply refer to the appropriate event key and configure the necessary URL. So I just wanted to quickly walk you through this part of Zoho Desk documentation to highlight the webhook support and the steps required to configure it. So with that, let's switch back to our slide and continue with the remaining steps. So as I mentioned earlier, the webhook needs to be configured in Zoho Desk using this supported webhook API. So to do this, we will set the event as contact at, which corresponds to the creation of a new contact in Zoho Desk, and provide a callback URL which will obtain which we will be obtaining from the incoming webhooks function defined within our Zoho Books extension. So this completes the second component, that is the complete webhook setup itself. So to summarize, these are the essential components required to implement the use case that we discussed. So connections to securely transfer data between Zoho Desk and Zoho Books, and a properly configured webhook in Zoho Desk that triggers on contact creation and sends data to the callback URL in Zoho Books. So I have already set up all the components as part of a working extension in Sigma platform. So next I'll walk you through how each of these components can be created right from within the Sigma environment. So for that, I'm getting into my Sigma platform. So this is the extension that I have created for our use case, which includes all the components needed for our particular use case. So once we open the extension, so we could see that we are taken into the Zoho Books developer platform, where we can view and manage every element or component to build and configure Zoho Book extensions. Now, when I click on build, you will notice that all the available components for building an extension for Zoho Desk are listed in the left panel. So now that we are inside the extension and have a view of all the available components, let's see how I have built the extension using these components. First, as we discussed earlier, the first step is setting up this extension to create necessary connections, right? So since our use case involves data flow between Zoho Desk and Zoho Books, we will need two secure connections, one to Zoho Desk to authenticate and trigger APIs from Desk, and another to Zoho Books to perform internal actions like creating contacts. So these connections ensure that all interactions between the two systems are both secured and authorized, and they can be created within this connections component. So over here, as you can see within my view my connections, I have already created both the connections, each with the required scopes to perform the necessary actions for this use case. So when I open the connection configured for Zoho Books, you will notice that I have added scopes to create incoming webhooks, create contacts, and access settings. So these scopes are essential, and without them, the extension won't have the necessary permissions to perform the actions within Zoho Books. And similarly, for the Zoho Desk connection, I have included scopes related to event subscriptions as specified in the Zoho Desk API documentation. So if you could see in the create webhook API, it is defined as we should have the OAuth scope as desk.events.create. So as defined over here, I have included the event scope, and along with these scopes to access the contact information. And since we will be working with contacts created in Zoho Desk as part of our use case. So these are the two necessary connections required for our implementation. And so now let's move on to creating an incoming webhook inside the Zoho Books. So to handle inbound webhooks, we make use of the incoming webhooks component that is available as part of this extension. So I'll just get into the component, and when I create a new webhook, new incoming webhook, the platform prompts me to provide a name and an optional description which can be filled in over here. So I'll just provide a name over here, and after that you will notice a deluge editor is provided, and this is where we can define the custom function that will handle the incoming data when the webhook is triggered. So for now, if I go ahead and save it without writing any logic, so when I open this particular webhook, you will notice that a OAuth URL is generated along with the predefined script that helps us fetch the ZAPI key URL. So this generated script is important. That is, it's what we'll be using to obtain the ZAPI key URL, which will be passed while calling the Zoho Desk Webhook API to register our callback URL. So at this stage, we are essentially just registering the webhook handler, that is the function that will receive data once the webhook is registered. However, the actual callback URL, that is which will be used by Zoho Desk to push the data, has not been generated yet, and we'll be looking at how to do that in the next steps. So now that the incoming webhook handler has been registered, the next step in the process is handled within the on install action, which you will find under the configure section. So once we get into the configure section and under the install actions, you can find the on install script. So why do we move to this on install step at this point? Because when an incoming webhook is created, the callback URL, that is the actual endpoint that will receive the data, isn't immediately available. So instead, Zoho Books provides a predefined OAuth script which we need to run in order to dynamically fetch this callback URL. So the ideal place to do this is within the on install function. So this function is executed automatically when the extension is installed in a Zoho Books organization. So making it the perfect point to fetch the ZAPI callback URL using the script we saw in the last step, and use this URL to register the webhook in Zoho Desk, specifying the event where we want to listen to, and in our case, the addition of a new contact. So with that explanation, let's move on to the on install script and see how it completes the webhook setup. So here is the custom script that I have already created for our implementation. From within this particular script, we'll use the organization context to get the API endpoint and ARG ID. Then we'll make a get call to fetch the callback URL of the incoming webhook we created earlier. And then this callback URL is written by Zoho Books and will be used as a target URL while creating the webhook in Zoho Desk. So I'll just explain the implementation, the code implementation that I have provided over here. So here, we are retrieving the API root endpoint and the organization ID from the organization object in Zoho Books context. So these are required to construct the endpoint used for fetching the callback URL. Then we are fetching the callback URL from the incoming webhooks function. So next, we invoke a get request to the incoming webhooks, generated OAuth endpoint. So this returns the API callback URL, which we store in the variable called ZAPI key URL. So this URL will be used as the target endpoint when configuring the webhook in Zoho Desk. That is, it is where the desk will post the real-time contact data. Then we have prepared the headers for the Zoho Desk API. As here we have defined the HTTP headers for the Zoho Desk API. So this includes the organization ID for Desk and the content type as application/JSON. After that, we have constructed the webhook payload. So here we have built the payload for the webhook creation in Zoho Desk. So this includes the event subscription, that is the contact ad, and a name and the description for the webhook, and the callback URL we fetch from the Zoho Books. So all these are bundled into a parameter map to the final API request. So finally, we'll make a post request to Zoho Desk web creation, webhook creation API, passing in the parameters as a JSON string, the required headers, and the configured connection. So to summarize on this, onInstall function, this onInstall function fetches the callback URL dynamically from Zoho Books, register a webhook in Zoho Desk via API, subscribes to the contacts underscore add event, and set up a real-time sync from desk to books. So this automation ensures the webhook is fully functional as soon as the extension is installed. And this is how we can automate webhook creation across two different Zoho products within a Sigma extension. So I'll just save it over here. So now let's look at the code snippet that runs inside the incoming webhooks function in Zoho Books. So this is the function that receives the real-time data from Zoho Desk via the webhook. So this function handles the I'll just open the function. So this function handles the incoming payload, extracts the relevant contact details, and creates a new contact in Zoho Books. So let me again walk you through this implementation step by step. So first, we retrieve the API root endpoint and the organization ID for Zoho Books. So both of these are required to make the API calls to Zoho Books. Then the incoming webhook, the incoming webhook payload from Zoho Desk is converted into a JSON list format, so we can loop through each record individually. Then we loop through the list of records, and for each item we extract the payload which contains the actual content, contact information from Zoho Desk. Then after that, from the payload we extract first name, last name, email address, and the account name from the nested account object. So these fields are required for creating a new contact in Zoho Books. And finally, we build up a parameter map with these extracted values and make a post request to the Zoho Books contacts API. So this API call uses the connection that we configured earlier for Zoho Books. So finally, once the contact is created, we return a success message along with the original data for debugging and logging purposes. So to wrap it up all, the onInstall function sets up the integration by fetching the callback URL and creating the webhook in Zoho Desk. So the incoming webhooks function in Zoho Books retrieves the data, process it, and create a new contact in Zoho Books. And together they enable seamless real-time contact sync from the Zoho Desk to Zoho Books. So with this, let's move on to the live demo and see how this works in live action. So for that, I'll just get into my Zoho Desk account. Here I'll go ahead and create a new contact over here. So I'll just go ahead and create a new contact. I'll provide a name over here. And an email address. And along with this, I'll provide an account name over here. So once all these essential details are provided, and when you click on submit, so you can see that a contact has been successfully created in Zoho Desk. So as per our extensions implementation, this account creation has to be automatically captured, and the same account has to be created in Zoho Books, right? So let's just get into the Zoho Books account and check if the account has been created, contact has been created over there. So for that, we'll get into the customers module, which is available within sales section. So when I get into the module, so you could see that the contact with the name John Gregory that I have created in Zoho Books has been successfully populated in the Zoho Books account. So this brings us the end of our use case demonstration. So using the webhooks feature, we were able to handle real-time data updates from Zoho Desk into Zoho Books, triggered whenever a new contact is created in Zoho Desk. So this example helped us explore how inbound webhooks can be configured and utilized effectively as part of our Zoho Books extension.